And the energy aspect, which as a medical student and scientific, I would consider it very new agey, for many, like it seemed very like, just, light. And, like it all felt a little superstitious or something, like a wishful thinking. But then when doing meditation, it started to become something more experiential, more concrete, maybe something that is difficult to put into words, but I started to sense that in different ways, both in terms of mind, that sense of almost like a river, something that is flowing, that it can be a bunch of thoughts that distract you, but that even can become something a little more, I don't know, I'm thinking the word luminous, but it's not that I'm seeing lights necessarily. It's like one could start doing that investigation in terms of mind and bring another level of stability and depth to the practice. So for me, they're all very much interconnected. And at some point, the thing with mindfulness and the mindfulness movement is that sometimes it seems to stay just at certain levels. And the richness of the ancient traditions like Buddhism is that they go very far. So the benefits also go further.
I love that you mentioned that about energy being sort of this, seems sort of esoteric idea, because again, I also really, because of my background in Tibetan medicine, this is one of the beautiful things about Tibetan medicine, is that it is a science, by itself. It's an ancient science. It's a little different than modern science. It has a different view of the universe, based off the 5 elements, basically. Like that's the fundamental principle, is that the whole universe is composed of the 5 elements. And, everything we do is kind of in relationship to our inner 5 elements and the outer 5 elements. And then when they conflict, we have disease, right? Or when we have too much of one element or another, or one element hurts the other, we have a problem, right? And then what do? We use diet, we use lifestyle, we use herbal medicine and external therapies, which are all composed of the 5 elements, to reharmonize the elements. The internal teacher, again, Menpa Wangmo, also would always say that you can also see Tibetan medicine as purely spiritual, because of this amazing integration with Buddhist knowledge. And so, but the better way is to see the merge of the two, that Tibetan medicine is really a integration of both science and spirituality. And this is a more whole view of the tradition, but also, everything, right? And I think that honestly, the world is becoming a little more open, I feel. And mindfulness is a sign of that, I think, openness to the world being a little more than what we just are told, I think. And not necessarily in a religious sense, it's more of just knowing that there's this connection that we all have, I guess, that is deeper. But I say all that because I oftentimes, try to address the fact that this idea of energy doesn't have to be something so esoteric. But in simple terms, we can experience energy through our breath. And this is the base of all the movements in our bodies, and it relates to all the movements externally. In fact, stress, the experience of stress, is generally around movements, right? Outside of us. We have movements in the atmosphere, we have emails that come, we have things flying around us, this external stimuli. And the way we respond to those movements is either we have an acute stress response, and we see it as something, a threat, or we work with it and we harmonize. And a lot of this response, again, is governed by our breathing. If we breathe well, we get less of a alarming response to things. We activate, if we breathe deeply and diaphragmatically, we activate our parasympathetic nervous system and we stay calm and relaxed. If we breathe shallow, and fast, we tend to freeze up or want to run and start to mobilize our energy to get the hell out of there. So yeah, it just made me think of that when you said that, because I think it's time for us to open up a little bit and realize that science and spirituality don't need to be mutually exclusive.
No, I completely agree. I mean, that's it's wonderful what science has achieved and medical science in the West. But that's where I started to, maybe this is too much of a Spanish expression, me hace ruido, like it's noisy. Like I started having a little bit of trouble with a certain reductionistic approach, that doesn't considers that everything is built out of matter, almost like we build a computer and mind seems to be a byproduct of those material elements coming to certain complexities. And it's fascinating, but I felt like something was lacking, particularly in a concrete manner, not just in a theoretical point of view. I would see, not all, I met some really incredible doctors. Some of them were my teachers, and some became very good friends who I admire very deeply, both in terms of their understanding and how they treat their patients and their dialogue and considering them as a whole, right? But a lot of times I would be very disappointed as a student, the way, they would refer as a patient that we would all have to go, all these students would have to go touch and learn, and they were referred, oh, well, let's go and see that cirrhotic liver on bed number, blah, blah. So it's like a number and it really, I was having trouble with that. And after, so part of my crisis was like, do I really want to be a doc? Can I do this way? And like I felt at that time that there's, and I still feel, and I'm not the only one, there's many authors that I've discovered that are exploring that area that science somehow seems to be missing. For example, when you talk about the 5 elements, if you mention this to most medical doctors in Western science, and you talk about earth and air element or wind element, and you talk about space and fire, it almost seems like, oh, well, that's some kind of primitive form of understanding. Now we talk about H2O, 2 molecules of hydrogen, and that's water with 1 of oxygen. And we have a much better description, because there is no understanding of what it implies, that somehow what was left out in that more material description that Western science has is the whole aspect of conscience or mind. And I've seen some very good explanations of that's what the 5 elements don't exclude, that they include it. So that's why it's a very different way of approaching thing, and that's why it's more holistic. And likewise in terms of emotions, for example, that's a very clear way, where we see emotions. And I think even those who deny energy in this spiritual way, when they talk about, oh, he was like burning with anger, so that already shows that we intuitively know that there's like a fire of anger. So expression, and is something that we see the manifestations when we see a person that is enraged, but also we all know ourselves being angry, and we know that we feel that fire of anger. So it all makes sense. But sometimes we don't have any tools, or we don't know how to understand it or how to approach it.
I totally resonate with what you're saying, and think that that's why I like the theory of the 5 elements, is because it's a foundation that you can really come back to more easily and understand your own experiences better. It's very practical, let's say. Whereas I love modern science too. I try as much as possible to keep myself up to date with all the emerging sciences, in particular like microbiome, circadian rhythm, like all these incredible things where, in fact, we're seeing the ancient science and modern science start to see eye to eye more and more. In my